It's $100 million apiece.
And welcome back to Jeff Koinange live at the Intercontinental Hotel, here with the man I call the economist's economist, Dr. David Ndii, PhD from Oxford. He runs an outfit called Africa Economics. He's a numbers cruncher. And twice a month in the Saturday Nation, he writes a column that I'm telling you, everybody should be reading, because this man holds nothing back. Tweets coming in thick and fast. I'll just read a couple, Dr. Ari, since you're not on Twitter, and let me tell you what it's all about. There's a guy called Independent. He says, my question is, what was Kenya doing when Uganda was building up her sugar industry? Politicking? Good question. And then Car Safe says, Mpaka usingizi umelost. Dr. Ndii anagonga ndipo. Woi, our economy. Okay. Finton Ndinya says, Professor Ndii, what a man, the kind of person you need as an advisor in any government. Okay, speaking of government, you've been very critical of Jubilee especially. And you know, from the get-go, and the big thing that Jubilee was promoting was a new standard gauge railway. The first time in 120 years we're going to have a railway. It was going to cost something like 300 billion shillings. And it was, it was going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread. You don't agree at all?
One, I have several points, and I've made them all, so I'm repeating. There is no feasibility study of that project in the public domain. So, I'd like to see what is the rate of return on that investment. So, what are we getting for our money back? Now, in the absence of that, I've done these things for many years. I started my career, as I said, as a number cruncher in the World Bank 25 years ago, appraising projects, development projects. And you never appraise a project in isolation. You always ask, what are the alternative investments you would make? What's the opportunity cost of putting money in that project as opposed to others? Then you rank your projects and you say this one has the highest rate of return. Now, even if I restrict that to railways, without even any analysis, I would have considered a couple of other projects and asked whether they'll be better. I've put some of this in the public domain. For instance, we're building a port in Lamu. We don't have infrastructure to evacuate cargo from that port. We don't have money for LAPSET either. So why didn't we build a railway from Lamu to Thika, which is only 440 kilometers? That would give you infrastructure to 2 ports now instead of 1, 2 corridors instead of 1. If you get to Thika, we have an old way live from Thika to Nanyuki. If you extend the railway to Nanyuki, you can actually then evacuate cargo to South Sudan and Ethiopia by road. So if it was 25 years ago and I was appraising these projects, I would put them side by side and ask which one has a higher return. Yeah. I know the other one would be infinitely cheaper in terms of cost. The other one is we have a huge tourist industry which is suffering at the coast. It's got huge logistics and transport problems. I would have considered a commuter rail from Malindi to Diani.
Down the coast?
Down the coast, up and down the coast. That would do a lot for expanding it. I can think about 5 or 6 different infrastructure projects.
But this SGR?
That I would then put next to it and ask which one gives us our highest return. But since I have not seen a feasibility study on this one, I don't think that's the way too.
Did you say there's no money for LAPSET?
We don't have money for LAPSET now.
There's none?
Zero.
They've started building the berths, 3 berths?
Yeah, they're building 3 berths with government money. But they don't have commitment from anybody else. The idea was that that would then crowd in other sources of finance. But to the best of my knowledge, and I'm quite knowledgeable on that, we don't have a penny. But let's go back to SGR. We're spending $4 billion on half the project.
To Nairobi?
To Nairobi.
Yes.
That means we may have to spend another $4 billion on the other half.
To Malaba?
$8 billion is almost 20% of GDP. I'm not aware of any country, other than building of the Panama Canal, that has spent 20% of GDP on one project. Especially building a railway where there is already another one.
So it was a bad move?
No, actually, show me the feasibility study and explain all these things to me. I'm actually quite knowledgeable in this subject, I would understand.
Yes.
so nobody is sort of risen to that challenge. I have raised the questions of alternative projects like the one I just mentioned. I've written that in the press, no response. I've asked them to their face, no response.
So what do you think was behind the thinking in this then?
I have no idea. Something happened. I think I saw this change about 5-6 years ago, when the discipline of analyzing public investment projects rigorously suddenly disappeared. And we went into something we call flagships. Vision 2030 flagship. As soon as a project is declared a Vision 2030 flagship, it is then passed by acclamation. After that is a chorus. No numbers, no rigorous analysis, no questions allowed. If you raise questions, you're sort of against or development, that kind of thing. And that's my problem. This is not, maybe there's a new way of doing things.
Are we
but
going to be paying for this for a long time?
We're going to be, again, there's very little documentation, but from what the little I've gathered is that this is actually more or less trade finance debt, which is medium term at most. So the sort of payback period for a railway would be at least 50 years. But we've borrowed less than 10-year money, as far as I know. So it's like taking an overdraft to finance a capital project, in a sense. So we're going to pay over a very short period.
But we did well with the Eurobond. We raised, what, 300 billion?
Yeah, but where is it?
It went into infrastructure projects.
Not that I know of. It went into the budget.
Are we spending more than we ever could pay back?
Well, it depends. If I could be wrong and say that this could be very high return projects, which will finally sort of pay off. We could strike more oil than we have to date.
That's right.
We could have windfalls of that nature. But if we are relying on the economy as I know it, we're going to struggle to pay off these things.
Okay, let me come back to your own point. Could we strike more oil? Do we have a lot of oil?
Again, not much information, but what I've gathered is so far 600 million barrels. That's not much.
No.
It's commercially exploitable, but you couldn't even ramp that up to meet our daily consumption.
Locally?
Yeah, doubtful. But it's all right, because then that would save you on the foreign exchange you're importing. But the way oil contracts are structured is that the revenue sharing is a production sharing, and it's front-loaded in favor of the investor. So the investor gets their money first. So so it starts with the guys. If you saw so much production over maybe 5-6, they get 90% at the beginning, and they end up with 10, and you get 90% at the end. So that means in terms of revenue, our revenue wouldn't be that much from it in the short run.
Is it possible we have more oil than Uganda or Ghana for that matter?
We could, but it's not been found. You have to find it first, then you have to develop it. And developing new finds will take you better part of 10 years.
And it's expensive.
And it's expensive, and because of the collapse in prices, the money has disappeared. The sort of money that was going into exploration and development of these sort of new sort of entrants into the market have disappeared. Oil economy is changing very dramatically. The US has become self-sufficient. It could become an exporter. That will change the dynamics. So the amount of capital, and a lot of the capital come from the US, which is very energy obsessed. So that capital is being spent domestically. So I think even how quickly the people who have found oil can bring that on stream, I doubt whether they will be able to do that in less than a decade.
Speaking of energy, Dr. Ari, you're also very critical of the Lamu coal plant that's being built. You're very critical. You're saying, what are we doing this for? We don't need that much energy. We don't need that many megawatts. Or what are we going to do with all this non-environmental friendly energy?
we are in what would be a very happy position of being a country where renewable power is cheaper than fossil fuel power. Okay? Geothermal,
Solar.
wind, hydro, solar. So if renewables are your cheaper source for the dirtiest fuel,
So the answer is?
I have no idea. I told you there is a binge investing mindset that has taken over in this country. And people say all sorts of things. I've heard people saying we need 5,000 megawatts of power.
Yeah.
When Kenya Airways was saying they're sort of gonna expand to whatever size, you couldn't get in our Airways that perhaps this is not wise.
And you wrote about that quite a while back.
I sort of mentioned it on and off for a while.
And now it's hit major turbulence.
It's hit major turbulence.
Is it in trouble?
It's in very serious trouble.
Who's to blame?
I don't know, but I've heard it said twice now. First I read it had been something attributed to the commercial manager some time ago, and I saw the same, so it confirms it, repeated by the financial, what do they call them nowadays? Financial
CFO,
head,
whatever,
CFO, whatever, those guys. That the big problem is that they did not anticipate competition when they were planning this expansion. Now, you sat down, you planned that you're going to expand and grow. And other people know there's a market.
And they kept buying $100 million planes.
And they kept buying $100 million planes. I mean, if you look at their numbers, so over the last 3 years, their fleet has grown. In 2013, their fleet was, I think, 34 aircraft. As of now, the last number I saw is like 52 aircraft. So that's an increase of 18 aircraft. And it's possible that they've replaced some other aircraft. So you're talking about buying or acquiring or adding to the fleet maybe 20 plus aircraft over the period of doubling the sort of share of new planes in the fleet. Now, I have that sort of a corporate strategy type thing. I'm sure the people who charge huge amounts of money to do that. I wish I was, because sometimes I think some common sense would get the job done.
Correct.
If you want to grow a business of this nature, what I would do is first, I'm going to expand, and there are all these routes I would develop. I would develop the route first, using leased planes. So you get a all sort of wet lease, what they call wet leases, sometimes even with crew and everything. I remember you were in that industry at some point.
I started out there, yes, correct.
So then you develop the route.
Right.
Then once you've grown the route, then
You get your own.
you get your own. Or well, you get an arrangement. Then you move on to the next route. So start with the business, then acquire the equipment.
It's that saying of yours, you keep saying, if you build it, they will come.
That seems to be the maxim, yeah.
Right, as opposed to...
When they come, we will build.
Right. Are they in trouble?
Well, if you see, the thing is, looking at what has happened, you see, partly it's related to what I said about our competitiveness in the region.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why KQ was doing very well is because there was no one else. Because Africa was the backwater. It was not interesting. But when you have all this Africa rising, Africa, all sorts of things, people do stand up and notice.
Ethiopian has done very well.
Yeah, Ethiopia is an old airline. It's the oldest airline in Africa. It's state-owned. We don't know how it runs, whether it's commercial, so I can talk about it.
Sure.
But the thing is, a lot of Kenya Airways business was taking Africans to other parts of the world, Nigerians to China and Dubai. And now the Gulf Airlines, for instance, are doing that. Okay, so it's not even clear that if they do recover, that they will reclaim the market share, because if their model was based on no competition, then clearly now there's a lot of competition. I also happen to know, incidentally, that people say that how else would KQ have grown? This is not the one way to grow. I know that, for instance, I know some of the guys who were doing strategy for KQ before the management that took over.
Right.
And their strategy was different. It was not to buy equipment.
It's to lease.
No, it was to acquire airlines.
So tell me, bottom line, Naikuni or Mbuvengu, who's to blame?
I don't know. I don't know enough
Come on,
about.
you're an economist. Who's to blame?
That's precisely the point. We deal with issues, not personality. They're not management issues. Which manager, which did that? I don't know who made what decisions.
Yeah.
But the point is, the company, that was not the only option. There's been a lot of time to rejig the strategy. They didn't rejig the strategy. The government sits on the board. This is a very strategic company.
Yeah.
Treasury sits on the board.
Yeah.
So I would not, I mean, there's a huge collective response. KLM is a major shareholder.
That's right.
So I don't know to what extent KLM was driving the decisions.
Chris Kirubi wants to get rid of the
I have no idea. So I mean, that's really more corporate type things. But from an economic perspective, you know, economists see strategy different. We see strategy as responding to the external environment. A lot of business people see strategy as executing operational things.
Yeah.
But looking at the external environment, which are driven by economics, they obviously got a whole lot of things wrong.
Doctor, you want to take a break, come back, talk about. You still fly KQ?
I don't fly much.
Why not?
I don't need to.
They come to you.
No, I don't need
If you
to.
build it, they will come.
I'm a provincial, I'm a village guy. I stay here. And
Dr. David Ndii, folks. My goodness, this man, he's calling it. Listen up, because it's all about us. The state of the economy. That's what we're talking about today. Everything that's ailing this nation of ours, despite the fact that we're middle income, $500 billion economy.
No,
50 billion, sorry, 50 billion.
that's very small.
South Africa is 500 billion.
It's 500. It's 500.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 10 times as much. Yeah.
Correct. As is Nigeria.
As is Nigeria, yes.
So we're tiny.
Yeah, we're small.
We're bigger than Uganda.
Well, yeah, something Museveni said, which I will not repeat.
At Koinange Jeff, hashtag is reality check. And we're going to take a reality check break. JKL. We'll be back in a moment. What did Museveni say?